Today we're diving into the battle that literally changed the course of English history forever. A single afternoon of fighting that ended 600 years of Anglo-Saxon rule and created the England we know today. We're talking about the Battle of Hastings in 1066, where Duke William of Normandy's invasion force faced King Harold Godwinson in a clash that would reshape language, culture, and civilization itself. Picture this. It's October 14th, 1066, and two armies face each other on a hill near the small town of Hastings. On one side, the Anglo-Saxon forces of King Harold Godwinson, battle-hardened warriors who had just marched 250 miles from their crushing victory over the Vikings at Stamford Bridge. On the other side, Duke William's Norman invasion force, fresh troops equipped with the most advanced military technology of the medieval world. This wasn't just another territorial dispute between medieval rulers. This was a collision between two completely different ways of life, two different military systems, and two competing claims to the English throne that would determine the future of an entire civilization. To understand what happened at Hastings, we need to go back to the beginning of this incredible year. 1066 started with the death of Edward the Confessor, King of England, who died without a clear heir. This created a succession crisis that would tear England apart. Three men claimed the English throne, and each had legitimate reasons. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl in England, claimed Edward had named him heir on his deathbed. William of Normandy insisted that Edward had promised him the throne years earlier and that Harold had sworn an oath to support his claim. Meanwhile, Harold Hardrada of Norway argued that he had inherited the throne through earlier Viking claims to England. The stage was set for a three-way war that would determine England's future. Harold Hardrada struck first, landing in northern England with 300 ships and 15,000 Norwegian warriors. This was the last great Viking invasion, led by a legendary warrior king who had fought from Russia to the Mediterranean. Harold Godwinson responded with lightning speed, marching his army north and utterly destroying the Viking force at Stamford Bridge on September 25th. But Harold's victory came at a terrible cost. His army had suffered casualties, his men were exhausted, and while he was fighting Vikings in the north, William of Normandy had landed in southern England with his own invasion force. William's invasion was a masterpiece of medieval logistics. He had spent months assembling not just an army, but an entire invasion fleet capable of transporting thousands of soldiers, hundreds of horses, and all the supplies needed for a major campaign. This wasn't a Viking-style raid. This was a planned conquest designed to permanently take over England. When Harold learned of William's landing, he faced an impossible choice. His army was 250 miles away from the Norman invasion force. His men were exhausted from the Viking campaign, and William was already building fortifications and devastating the English countryside. A smart commander might have waited, gathered reinforcements, and let William's forces weaken themselves trying to conquer fortified English towns. But Harold chose speed over caution. He force-marched his army south, hoping to catch William off guard, just as he had surprised the Vikings. This decision would change history. Harold's army reached the area around Hastings on October 13th and took position on a hill called Senlac Hill. It was a strong defensive position. The hill gave his forces the high ground, and the slopes were steep enough to slow any cavalry charge. Harold deployed his army in the traditional Anglo-Saxon formation, a shield wall of heavily armored infantry equipped with two-handed axes that could cleave through armor and horses alike. This formation had served the Anglo-Saxons well for centuries. It was essentially a human fortress, warriors standing shoulder to shoulder with interlocked shields, creating an impenetrable barrier that could withstand almost any assault. Behind the shield wall stood the Huscarls, Harold's elite bodyguard troops, some of the finest warriors in Europe. But William's army was different from anything the Anglo-Saxons had faced before. The Normans combined three military elements that would dominate European warfare for the next 400 years: heavy cavalry, massed archery, and tactical coordination between different types of troops. The Norman heavy cavalry was the medieval equivalent of modern tanks. These weren't just men on horses. They were aristocratic warriors, encased in mail armor, mounted on specially trained war horses, and equipped with lances designed to punch through enemy formations. When Norman cavalry charged, They hit with the combined weight of man, horse, and steel, moving at maximum speed. Supporting the cavalry were Norman archers, who could rain arrows down on enemy formations from distances that traditional infantry couldn't match. And coordinating everything was William himself, one of the most innovative military commanders of his era. The battle began at dawn on October 14th, with Norman archers shooting volleys into the Anglo-Saxon shield wall. But the English position was so strong that the arrows had limited effect. The Anglo-Saxons simply raised their shields and waited, knowing that their defensive position gave them every advantage. William then ordered his infantry forward, but the shield wall held firm. Anglo-Saxon warriors with their massive two-handed axes cut down Norman soldiers who tried to break through. For a moment, it looked like Harold's strategy was working perfectly. Then William deployed his secret weapon, the feigned retreat. The Norman cavalry charged up the hill toward the shield wall, but instead of pressing the attack, they turned and fled as if in panic. This wasn't real retreat. It was a carefully planned tactical maneuver designed to break up the English formation, and it worked perfectly. Seeing the Norman cavalry apparently fleeing in disorder, groups of Anglo-Saxon warriors broke from the shield wall to pursue them. This was exactly what William had hoped for. Once the English were scattered across the hillside, Norman cavalry wheeled around and cut them down. But Harold's main force still held the hilltop, and the battle was far from over. For hours, Norman attacks crashed against the Anglo-Saxon shield wall without achieving a decisive breakthrough. William himself was reportedly unhorsed 3 times and had to prove he was still alive to prevent his army from panicking. The turning point came in the late afternoon when William ordered a concentrated assault combining all his military arms. Norman archers shot high-angle volleys that fell behind the English shields, forcing the Anglo-Saxons to raise their shields and exposing them to cavalry charges. At the same time, Norman infantry pressed forward on foot, preventing the English from reforming their tight formation. It was during this assault that Harold Godwinson fell. According to the famous Bayeux Tapestry, he was struck in the eye by an arrow, though other accounts suggest he was cut down by Norman knights who broke through the shield wall. Either way, the death of the English king shattered Anglo-Saxon resistance. With Harold dead and their formation broken, the Anglo-Saxon army collapsed. Some groups fought to the death around their fallen king, but organized resistance was finished. William had won one of the most decisive victories in European history. The immediate consequences were obvious. William became King of England and would be known to history as William the Conqueror. But the long-term effects of Hastings were even more profound. The Norman conquest brought feudalism to England, completely reorganizing English society around the relationship between lords and vassals. Norman nobles received vast English estates in exchange for military service, creating a new aristocracy that would dominate England for centuries. More importantly, Hastings changed the English language forever. The Norman French spoken by the conquerors merged with Anglo-Saxon to create Middle English, which eventually evolved into the modern English we speak today. Thousands of French words entered English vocabulary, especially terms related to government, law, and culture. Norman architecture transformed the English landscape. The massive stone castles, cathedrals, and churches built by the Normans still dominate the English countryside today. These weren't just buildings. They were symbols of Norman power and permanence. The conquest also connected England more closely to continental Europe. Under Anglo-Saxon rule, England had been somewhat isolated from European politics and culture. The Normans brought England into the mainstream of European civilization, with consequences that lasted for centuries. Perhaps most importantly, Hastings demonstrated the decisive importance of military innovation. The Anglo-Saxon shield wall had been virtually unbeatable for 600 years, but Norman combined arms tactics made it obsolete in a single afternoon. This pattern would repeat throughout military history, traditional formations and strategies becoming useless when faced with new technology and tactics. The Battle of Hastings reminds us how quickly and completely historical change can occur. In just one day, an entire way of life that had existed for 6 centuries came to an end. The England that Harold ruled in the morning was gone by sunset, replaced by something completely different. But the battle also shows us the importance of leadership, strategy, and adaptability in determining historical outcomes. Harold fought bravely, and his men showed incredible courage, but William's superior tactics and innovative approach to warfare proved decisive. The Norman conquest shaped not just England, but the entire English-speaking world. The political, legal, and cultural institutions that the Normans established in England would eventually spread to North America, Australia, and other English-speaking regions. When we speak English today, we're using a language shaped by what happened at Hastings. When we see medieval castles or Gothic cathedrals, we're looking at Norman architectural traditions. When we talk about concepts like feudalism or chivalry, we're discussing institutions that the Normans brought to England. What do you think about the Battle of Hastings and its incredible impact on world history? Could Harold have won if he had chosen different tactics, or were the Normans simply too advanced militarily? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the battle that changed England forever, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more stories about the decisive moments that shaped our world, often in ways we're still feeling today. Remember, history isn't just about what happened. It's about understanding how the past created the present we live in now.